Alrighty. I know that we got a lot of people registered for this evening, so I'm really excited. I'm so passionate about toddlers and working with toddlers. Same with babies, like just families and kids in general, but there's something pretty magic when you know that people have been doing either years of bad sleep or they feel like in terms of the parenting and the boundary side of things, like things are just wayside to what they'd imagined, or, they're on the slippery slope, or even just that prevention, right? Of like, right, how are we going to navigate this next period, like that toddler period, because it is a whole brand new landscape again with our little ones. And I really believe that the foundations that we set and the foundations that we lay now make a profound impact, like through to adulthood, like and beyond. We know that so much of a child's brain is forming in this first few years in particular, and then beyond. And also we know that the way, like, the best way to put this is the script. So the way that we parent will really matter to their relationships in the future. It will matter to themselves, their self-esteem, their outcomes, the respect that they have for others, and so on and so forth. So it really matters. It's really, really important, and it's daunting and it's wonderful all at the same time, because it's a pretty big job for us, right? But it's just so important. So I'm just going to wait like maybe another minute, and then I'm going to get started. I just want to give everyone a chance to jump in. I will be recording this as well. So I will send it through to everyone tomorrow. So if you can't stay for the whole thing, but we've got an hour together. If you've got a partner around, get them to jump on board. Like, I can honestly say, they won't regret having this time, or taking this time if possible. And if not, if they're busy with other kids or, whatever's happening, try and get them to watch back. Because especially when you can be on the same page, right? It's like a whole nother ball game when both of you guys understand it and are on the same page. And, I understand that's not always the case. So yeah. Um, so perfect. So basically, we're going to get started. We're going to talk about toddlers, and we're going to start around sleep, the sleep side of things when it comes to toddlers. I'm essentially going to talk to the toddlers that are particularly into a bed or moving into a bed, and just some of the big things that really from about 18 months upwards, we sort of start to see creeping in when it comes to toddlers. Now, one of the bigger parts for toddlers that we often see is parents like when to know how to drop that nap. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about day structuring first, and then we're going to go from there. So, essentially, when it comes to day structuring in general, what we want to do is we want to make sure that if our little ones are starting to refuse their day nap, that we've added a bit more awake time first. So, we don't just rush to drop the day nap. The day nap in general can really, the day nap in general can really stick around. It typically drops somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5, is the typical, which is quite a broad range. But to be honest, that's what we see. I mean, some little ones will keep their day nap till 4 years of age. And as long as they're still going down by, say, 7:45 at the latest or around that and having a good night's sleep, then that's fine. I always tell parents, before you consider dropping the day nap, make sure you've added a bit more awake time first. So you really just sort of triple check that off. So you add that more awake time first. The next thing is that toddlers, and I'm going to talk more to this when it comes to nighttime sleep as well. But we want to make sure that they've had a really good chance to expend that physical energy so that they are prepared for a nap. Now, from just under and or close to 2.5, it's very normal that our toddlers might not want to sleep in their sleep space anymore, particularly their cot or their beds. And they might only nap in the car, for example. And that's really common. And when they get to that age, of course, you can trial more awake time. You can make sure they've expended that physical energy, like all of that. But once they get to that age, if you sort of think, I'm really like pushing that, like I feel like I've done everything and it's just not happening, car trips are what, then sort of take its place. Just a little car kip, for example, or a walk in the pram for a little kip that way. And typically just, getting them half an hour, 45, an hour, whatever you can whatever time you can buy for their nap, that's perfect. So before you drop, you would always make sure you've tried more awake time. You would make sure that they have that physical expenditure happening. in the lead up, like really that physical side of things. You'd make sure that you are checking, like in that lead up to nap, are they really running the show? Like, is our, is sleep really hard in general? And so, therefore, when it comes to this day nap, they're just going to drop it too early. Now, one thing I see is that little ones who don't have good or healthy sleep habits in general, so they're like really struggling with self settling, they've always relied on something to get to sleep, sleep's always been inconsistent or quite messy or hard or something that you have to do for them. It's very common that they will drop naps earlier than when they actually should, because sleep is fragile for those babes anyway. And so it's especially fragile when it comes to day naps and as they get older. And so we don't want to rush it. You want to then look at, like, what does that lead up to bedtime look like, or to the nap time? How, like, does my little one have some really healthy sleep foundations on board for the nighttime that then will help them to take and keep that daytime nap longer? And where are they at age wise? Because a lot of people hold on to day naps thinking, but they're so exhausted by 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. and things like that. Now, sometimes little ones can be really ready to drop their day naps, and the day naps are just proving really troublesome. But we also have to expect that it is a bit of a transition process and it takes a little bit of time. Okay. So I do want you guys to think, well, okay, even though it takes a bit of time, for them to adjust, it doesn't mean they're not necessarily ready. So I would say the same thing when people are looking to unswaddle their babies. Their hands flail everywhere, and parents like, oh, quick, keep swaddling, keep swaddling. For example, keep napping because they're struggling with something. But the unswaddling takes a bit of time to adjust to, just as this takes some time to adjust to. And so, when you are looking at dropping that nap, a bit of a walk in the pram in the early afternoon, but trying to keep them awake, obviously, but just a bit of downtime, maybe a bit of quiet reading with them, bit of chill time in the early afternoon. If they're 2.5 onwards and they have a bit of screen time, the early afternoon might be a good space to put it, obviously making sure that they don't fall asleep at 3 p.m. preferably. And if they do, just give them a quick little kip, just be like, right, 15, 20 minutes and then we're up, for example. If you can give your little one a 30-minute nap and they still go down by 7:38, that's no problems. But that's just sort of an idea. So the main part is that we want to make sure that we're not rushing to that. We've had a look at their sleep pressure, that energy expenditure, adding more awake time, who's leading that bedtime, offering it out and about if we need to for a little while. And then when they're ready to drop it, knowing that, every time we give it, bedtime is like 8:30, 9:30. It's crazy. We just need to get rid of it, or we need to cap it. And in terms of how to cap it, you might start with an hour and see if it brings you a bit more, of a reasonable bedtime. And if it does, great, sit there for a little while until they start to push it back again. And then you might cap it at half an hour, or you might do it on some days and then you might not do it on others. So that nap can be quite interchangeable. And then also keeping an eye on the fact that at some point they probably will only have that on the go, which I'm just fingers crossed he's not coming soon for me, but Charlie is now about 2 months, 2 or 3 months overdue. So who knows when that's coming for us? But snap time is such a big work time, which I know so many people are in the same boat, and or just a bit of downtime, right? Like, it's really funny because when they're younger, we're kind of like, oh my gosh, all these naps are a nightmare to try and work around. And I'm always like telling people, like, you've got really like 9, months, and then you're only on 2 naps, and then before you know it, like, what is the first year? Um, so then basically, Phoebes has asked, her 4.5 years still does an occasional nap. How long should it be? Honestly, I don't have a length. 4.5-year-olds still having a nap. Like, if it was 30 minutes, that'd be amazing. So there's no specific time, but if an hour and a half still means that bedtime is between 7:30 and 8, that's fine. If bedtime's now pushing past it, then the hour and a half's too long. So there's no specific amount of time, because at this age and stage, they're also variable. You have to see what works with not pushing your bedtime too late. I don't like the idea of keeping a nap and then bedtime being 9 p.m. I just don't think that that is the way that their bodies are supposed to, run with the circadian rhythm of day and night and that sort of thing. So as long as it's not pushing bedtime too late, you can just do a couple of little trials and see what's still working, basically. And like I mentioned before, to nap on some days and not on others is great. Now, moving into that evening time, basically the next thing to look at is, if your little ones are struggling with bedtime and you're thinking, is this the nap? Should I drop it? Should I cap it? What's going on with bedtime? The first thing I want to talk about is this thing called sleep pressure. And it's going to be one of the most important things that I talk to you about, basically, in terms of sleep today. I'm just actually seeing if I've got a pen. I don't have a pen. That's okay. So I was going to do a little drawing for you, but you're going to have to miss out on my drawing for now. But don't worry, you won't miss out on any good knowledge. But basically, sleep pressure, and for most of you who follow, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about sleep pressure. But let's talk about toddler sleep pressure. So for baby sleep pressure, I'd be like if they're having lots of feed in their awake time, like feeds here, feeds there, and their awake time, like snack feeding, or they're feeding for really long periods of time, they can kind of get a bit of a second wind afterwards and then lose that appetite for sleep. So, this way that I define sleep pressure is essentially building up the pressure for sleep. So, wanting to sleep, right, or being ready and needing sleep, but not because you've stretched them with a crazy long awake time and expected that they'll just pass out when they're ready, because that'll just incite all the adrenal hormone, like the opposite side of things. They just become wired, as I'm sure we've all experienced. So instead, what we want to look at is in that lead up to bedtime, we want to make sure that they've been playing and they've really got that physical expenditure coming out. So not just physical, but also the things that you need to keep an eye on are, and guys, you're going to hear me mention screen time a few times in this whole thing, right? Most of you, like I've said before, if you follow me, you're going to understand my views on screen time. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean I'm going to stand here and be like, you should not have any, and I'm so against it. Not at all. But there's times to use it and there's times not to use it. And there's times where it's actually really going to screw you. And look what I found, a pen. So if we have, I'm going to draw a circle that looks a little bit more, I'm not sure what that is. But this is their whole awake time, right? So they're like building up this is all like their lead up to bedtime, right? Back up the top is going to be bedtime. And then suddenly if we go, okay, let's right here offer them some milk right here, right? And so they're having their milk and they're quite chill on their milk. And then they finish their milk at this point. Yeah. And then we let them maybe have some time where we're letting them maybe have some screen time. Yeah, in the lead up. I'm going to make this darker in a second. And then we go from screen time and maybe we do a few books, right? Let me just color this in. Okay, so basically what we want to look at in that lead up to bedtime is this was supposed to be their awake time where they're building up that sleep pressure, da, da, da. And then before bed, we're like, have some milk and chill in your little chair and have your milk. Oh, and then we'll put the TV on. You can have some TV time. And then we might do a few books after that. And you can see that all of this expenditure has now been chill time, chill time, chill time. And then they ditch their bottle of milk, the TV goes off, they get out of their high chair after sitting there for 45 minutes because they're allowed their iPad in there, but suddenly they're a lengthy eater, slow eater, or, whatever it might be, right? They've asked for 15 books and now we're stuck doing 15 books before bed, and books are now going for half an hour. And then we're like, they get into bed or they ditch those things are done. And they're like, yeah, boy, let's go. Like, let's play, let's do this. They're going crazy. We're like, are they overtired? Are they wired? Or should we drop the nap? When in fact, your sleep pressure was your bargain point. And so, before you consider dropping naps or changing anything or looking at awake times, we must look that in their awake time, they've really been able to build up that pressure for sleep. So I don't wind down before bedtime. I'm essentially like, let's have playtime, as much outdoor time in the afternoon. Guys, have you ever noticed when you're camping, you're tired, you're dead tired by 7:30, you're like, I need to go to bed. And everyone's like, it's only 7:30. Like, it's crazy. That's because there's no artificial lights that are screwing us and there's no screens and all of that. And we're expending more energy. We're outdoors more, so we're getting the exposure to the circadian rhythm, the natural way that our hormones are supposed to be induced, right? To represent that nighttime or evening is coming as opposed to morning time, right? When you get early exposure to early morning sunlight, it does the most profound things for circadian rhythms, right? But our kids are now like this. We've got all our artificial lights. They're just going straight from inside, maybe on screens, sometimes screens in the car, into the classroom. Like it's so lacking in terms of those things that naturally produce and stimulate these hormones that they so desperately need for good circadian rhythms, which play huge roles in their good sleep, not just at the falling asleep, but actually staying asleep during the night, that sort of thing. Plus their brain and especially their eyes in general. So just going to get a whole heap of information about all random things. But these things are really important. So instead, I'd be having playtime right up until you can. If you can eat dinner outside at the table, like in this weather now for us, like it's spring, we honestly, like, I don't even know that we use our dining table inside. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to be, free range like us. But it's just these things like make such a big difference. Like honestly, even if it's just a bloody picnic some nights or whatever it is, just that outdoor time can be so amazing, because not only are they getting that exposure to the natural, rhythms of the environment, but they're also then getting that expenditure of their energy, physically, and nothing prepares a toddler better for bed, right? So just be mindful that in the lead up to bedtime, that you're not having this chill time on the couch, you're not having this chill time, on milk. During the milk, they're not dragging on their milk for half an hour or sitting in their chair for 45 minutes while they've got an iPad in front of them eating and that sort of thing. We're like, no, we're done. It's, you've had your offering of food. This is your offering of milk. You got your 10 minutes, whatever it is, and then it's done. Consider moving it to a cup instead of like a little bottle or things like that, right? And those sorts of things really matter. So then we've got that playtime. You might do a couple of books, but keep them engaging. Do them on the floor in their room or outside of their room. I'm going to explain why in a minute. And that's when you'd be like, right now, off to bed. Now, a lot of people will say, I can't get rid of that bottle. I can't do this. Like they just won't let me, or they won't eat properly. They won't do this, or they won't do that. And a lot of what this webinar is going to be back is calling you guys back into leader. So you guys are their big, sturdy people. They're big, sturdy leaders who, for many of you, might find yourself now in big, sturdy, scaredy cat, basically, of your little people. Which I get. I've got a little person. I'm right in the thick of it. And so, what I would say is that I always tell people, like, when I'm 65, I get to choose again. Every single day, I get to make a new decision. And I feel like our brains, remember our brains, and guys, this is all very relevant to sleep, okay? But it's going to be an overall webinar. We spoke about this behavior, feelings, all the things. Our brains want what's comfortable. It wants what's easy, what's the path of least resistance, right? We are wired to do the path of least resistance. Okay. The path of least resistance is whatever we've either been doing, whatever causes the least amount of distress or upset and things like that, right? It doesn't mean it's right. Right. So getting up and replacing a dummy 13 times a night so that a baby doesn't cry, because we're also stressed about any sort of negative emotion, so to speak, doesn't mean that that's right for the baby. Actually, foundationally, the baby needs better sleep, like essentially needs way better sleep than that. And replacing a dummy 13 times a night, whilst it just doesn't evoke any like bad feelings or whatever, there's plenty of, poor consequences to that, right? This is no different. So, whenever you're going to put something in place that we speak about, I want you to remember me reminding you that your brain is going to tell you all the reasons why you shouldn't do it and all the reasons why you can't. And what happens is that people say, oh, it just feels too hard. I just busy at work. Next week, this. They're just too old for it now. Oh, I feel really bad because I started this. So, I feel bad now that they're upset with something I started. And what I'm going to categorically say is you get to choose better. You get to choose better about anything that I speak to tonight, from the biggest space of love in my heart you can imagine, and also the biggest space of lack of judgment, no judgment, also the biggest space of understanding, right? But you get to choose different, and it's not too late, and you absolutely have every ability to do this, and you don't need to, have this lined up before you make that change. You don't need to have your partner on board necessarily, but you need to be really convicted in, this is the ideal that I want for my family. Here's some of the things that really mean a lot to me when it comes to my family, like what they eat, what they, sleep, what they see, that sort of thing. As in screens, things like that, right? That out time, like whatever it is, is really important. But what's going to happen is that when you make the change for your little people, their brain is also being like, this is not what I want. This is not what we know. This feels unsafe. This feels hard. I don't like it, do what we know. And they're going to have really big feelings. So whenever you change something or you hold a boundary that now you've been like, no, no, we're not doing 3 books, we're doing 2 or whatever it is, we're not having milk in a bottle anymore, you're 4, it's time to put it into a cup if we even need it at all. And if they don't want it, they don't need it. Milk is just calcium at this stage, right? You can get calcium in plenty of other ways. So the way that we're then going to approach this lead up to bedtime is I would have a stamp chart. On that stamp chart, you put and guys, this isn't rewards based. You put brushes teeth, gets pajamas on, like whatever your lead up you want it to be, right? I'll attach this to the email. You'll get it tomorrow. But you're essentially going to have this stamp chart in the lead up to bedtime. You're going to stamp off each activity as they go along, and they can stamp it, put them on a chart for them. Like children love a sense of autonomy. They love to think they're in control. You might be like, which pajamas do you want? You choose. And you've just got a couple laid out. You can go and choose, I'm going to time, we've got 60 seconds. You go choose your 2 books, like that sort of thing, right? So that's really important. Now, the next thing is in the lead up to bedtime, how much does this make sense, right? That you're going to put 5 boring activities like brush teeth, have a cup of water, go to the toilet, put your pajamas on, that sort of thing. You're going to put all those lists of activities at the end of the day. And at the very end of doing all those things, guess what they get? Bedtime. Woohoo. Like, no wonder they're like, yeah, no one cares. They don't care about your list of shitty activities to then hit the golden arches of bed. Like that is just the pits, right? For them. So we need to make it a little bit more appetizing for them. And here's the deal. Anytime you take an easy road, a quick road, right? Let's call it. I want you to remember you've probably taken the long way around. You took the detour. So yeah, it took just, yep, I'll just quickly do this. I'll quickly fix this. I'll quickly give them that. I always want you to remember long way. It'll bite you in the ass down the track somewhere, like that detour, or when you go, now a shortcut, that's the word I'm looking for. The shortcut screws you often, right? Because if you quickly appease, right? Okay, iPad at dinner. Okay, this, that, at that time. Okay, 7 more books, like whatever it is, just I'll sell my soul, just go to bed, right? They are leading the show for a start. That has its own consequences. The second thing is that most of the things that you do that you quickly appease with will spiral. It'll become bigger and they'll want more and then this and that as we're going along, right? So it's really, really important that we are all aware. And I want you to catch yourself 2 things. This is going to feel uncomfortable because holding boundaries feels pretty average and making changes feels pretty shit, right? That's why people stay in bad relationships, bad jobs, bad eating habits, like all the things, right? Because making changes feels so average and our brains are just like, go back to the other shitty way. It's way cooler. So it's really important to keep that in mind. But the next thing is that in that lead up to bedtime, what we want to also remember is that it's we basically want to remember we're asking a lot of them. Can we move things a little bit forward? We don't have to do it all in the same order. Can we shower straight after daycare or kindy, whatever it is? Can we for example, do like, and then get pajamas on and then just give them a little wipe down after dinner. Like, I know sometimes they get really messy, but like, can we mix things up a bit? Can we bring their toothbrush out to where they're playing and be like, can we grab their toys and be like, look, let's take your car, let's take your dinosaur. I've got some weird Star Wars thing. Let's brush his teeth. That's so funny with his brushing his teeth. What can I see in your teeth? Oh my gosh. And you're naming what they ate that day. Like, that's my kid's favorite. All of them have loved it. All 3 different personalities, and all 3 are like, I'm like, there's your pancakes. Oh, did you have grapes today? Like, that sort of thing, right? So we're just taking a little bit of time to see where we can mix things up a bit so it's not just 5 boring requests in the lead up. See if we can bring it earlier, including dinner sometimes, especially if you've got a fussy eater, bringing it forward a little bit to make sure they're not at the end of their wits with everything. And then can we mix it up and make it enjoyable a little bit more, right? So rather than it's just these requests, and sometimes you think that making it enjoyable is more effort, right? It sounds like effort to have to take a toy around and be like, look at the toy. But honestly, like, it's actually pretty special when you see them enjoying something like that, right? So can we essentially take these things and make it more enjoyable for them in that lead up to bedtime, for example, and mix things up a little bit and find time to connect. So I want you to have that stamp chart where they're stamping off and they're feeling really autonomous, and it's also a distraction from their normal means of control, and I want this and I want that. It's a bit of a distraction as well. You can do at the end of, like, if they, do all of it in a row and have a good night, they can have a little lucky dip, for a while if you want, but it doesn't have to be rewards based, and rewards in general don't really change much. I'm sure most of us have tried. But in the same thing, we're going to ask of them certain things, and we're going to also need to come some halfway. Now, our society and our environment that our little ones are growing up in, really in many ways has set us up to fail, and it's really hard. It's actually a really tricky time, to be parenting, because we are up against a lot. We're up against, the pressure of screens that is insurmountable. We're up against all the, pressure of all the things that we should be doing. Many of like us as mums, have to and or choose to go back to work, and work to be a big part, of our lives. We have less of a village. I just believe there's just so much, like, our lifestyles in general, with all the shitty food, and all of that, that really impacts our children. It impacts their behavior. It impacts, so much. And so what I want you guys to remember is that our little ones were born, and their first and foremost thing was not necessarily to get food, it was to seek connection, it was to seek an attachment. Because it is the attachment that will keep them alive and safe, right? It is not necessarily that, like, they weren't just like milk. It's like mum, it's, or, whatever. It is attachment. Let me find something that is going to protect me, keep me safe, keep me away from the, the wolves in the primal days, like all the things, right? And that connection and search for attachment actually doesn't change. And in fact, as adults, we wonder why people go in gangs, people join, like all these different things, because they found a sense of attachment and belonging, right? And what we know really, really, impacts children, and not just children, but particularly adolescents, is, you guys want a good outcome for your children, you must get the book. It's called, Hold on to your kids. Hold on. Yeah, hold on to our kids, or hold on to your kids. And it's by Gabor Mate. I can't remember how to say his name, but it is the most profound book, because it talks exactly to what I'm going to talk about now. And that is that our children's primary attachment to us is the most important thing for them, and it needs to remain very important to them. And he talks in the book a lot about having a recollecting of children after daycare, or a recollecting after school, or a recollecting after being apart from them. Now, some of you guys might be home with them all day, right? But sometimes when we're home all day, if you really look at it, sometimes we're like, I actually, like, did I look them in the eyes and have a little chit chat with them today? Did I, like, sit and play for a moment, or just stop, or slow down, or just engage with just them and have a little conversation or a little chit chat with them? Like, that real, like, presence, that real, like, that moment with them. Like, did I have that today with them? And I want you guys to remember this forever. It is so fucking important. Like, it is so important that they know that they are being rebrought home to us, because what we want to do in this lead up to bedtime, and especially if they're in daycare, especially if we've had a busy day, and we in general are living in our heads because we're so busy, is just taking a moment when we're getting in, same with our partners from work or whatever it might be, to literally, like, take 3 deep breaths, like, slow everything down, get back a little bit into our body, and be like, I'm here. I'm in this space with my children. I'm, present. I'm giving, them eye contact. I'm asking questions about what they're doing. I'm showing curiosity. I'm, wanting to invest into them that time and that connection. Because when people say, like, you need to fill their cup before bed, like, they're not taking the piss. Like, they genuinely need that sense of connection. And what's really sad is that a lot of children these days are getting connection and attachment to their parents from poor behavior, because it's the only way they can get it. Right? Is their really big behavior, the issues, or the really big feelings, and that sort of thing is what induces the most amount of attention, and actually stops their parents in their track to be able to pay attention to them long enough. Like, really sad and really true, and really also, guys, again, remember, this is no blame. It's just like these are the things that are going to really matter. And in the lead up to bedtime, we must check that off, right? And so this is why, like, I really couldn't keep speaking just about sleep with toddlers and not be like, parenting must come in, like, as in together, the boundaries, the behaviors, the big feelings, the sleep, like it all just really comes in together. And so in your lead up to bedtime, we must find opportunity for connection, because here's the deal, is that we are in a society now where peers, so children from really young are raising each other. So in daycare centers, they're around each other so much. They're going to school much earlier, and there's a lot less time with families. Then they're going into sport. We catch up with friends. The kids go off. And so peer-based growth now, or like development, is really primary, which has a lot of problems with it, which explains a lot of the reasons why we have so many mental health issues, so many issues with suicide for teenagers and teenagers going off track, right? Because when you are peer-based, it really freaking matters what your peers think of you, because they are your primary attachment instead of your parents. And what parents bring to their children is unconditional love. Well, what they should is unconditional love. It is just protection, caring, like the purest love. It is love no matter what. It is lack of judgment. It is not superficial. When peers are our attachment, the biggest primary attacher is likeness. Am I like them? And that is the primary attachment that they will go to. Am I like them? And they will want to be like each other. And when they become their primary attachment, what you try to say to them will not matter, because when relationship is low, resistance is high, and the other way around as well. And so when connection is really high, you're more likely to have an influence. You're more likely to stay as that authority figure to your children, and to call them back home at the end of each day, and to call them back to who they are. When that relationship and that connection is really low, if not there at all, and this matters from young guys, when that connection and that relationship is dwindling, your influence when you're trying to ask them things and hold boundaries and things like that is less. So we must connect to direct, right? And so then we can understand, as they start to get older, they just want to be they just want to be liked and like this. So when a teenager or somebody else says to them, I don't like you, or you're fat, or whatever it is, that really matters. It's like a parent turning their back on them, because that was their primary connection. And what's sad is that now they're saying that children go home and children go to their house with their parents and get on their phone to go home to their friends, right? To their friends are their home instead of the home that they're in with their parents, right? So it really matters from young. We recollect, we reconnect, then we're directing our children, and then we're like, right, baby, like, let's do this together. Let's, join in, because I can guarantee you that I know not to take shortcuts, and my relationship with my children is profound. My need for yelling is, I'm not even saying it's like, it's very minimal. If that, like, I just don't have it there, like, because we are in relationship with one another, that harmony. Of course, there's moments where I'm like, guys, I've literally asked you 4 times. Like, of course, there's those moments, right? But that real friction where there's just huge feelings, there's huge, like that friction between parent and child, like bringing back to relationship is really important. Now, the other reason why you might have, trouble with that lead up to bedtime, or the bedtimes in general, or the behaviors in general, or see really big behaviors, is when the behaviors in themselves are managed like for like. So, for example, if they're raising, you're raising, everyone's raising, that sort of thing, or if we just simply don't know how to manage their big feelings. So whilst they're giving you sort of ideas in that lead up to bedtime, something else that's really important is to make sure that with that idea that we've got these boundaries in this lead up to bedtime, your job is then to allow your little ones to have their big feelings. This is often really hard for dads in particular as well. A very big generalization. It's really hard for everyone, but it can be really frustrating for dads. For men, and boys, little boys, but vulnerability. So being really vulnerable, right, with big feelings, it feels really uncomfortable. It's really hard. Now, this isn't just men, but it's more, we tend to find that they're a bit more prone to this, because feelings and feeling things feels really vulnerable, and it feels really hard. And dads will often step into this role of like, we need to shut this down. They can't be doing this at school and they'll get teased by their mates, and they go straight into this idea that they have to shape them into these like hardy people who are ready for the big bad world, right? Like, when in fact, the most resilient children and the ones who essentially will be powerful men, not driven by ego as boys, will be the boys into men who have been able to feel their feelings, show their feelings, know that they're safe to have these big feelings, and learn how to regulate their emotions. This is so big for us, especially given all of the situation with what's going on with men and women, right, in today's day and age. But when you can teach a little boy that, and girl, but that their feelings are so okay to have, not all behaviors, we'll talk about that in a minute, but their feelings of anger, girls, let them be angry. Boys, let them be sad. Let them cry. Let them all cry. Let them get all of it out. They're so angry that you're not going to do more books. They're so angry that that dad's not doing, or mum's not doing the brushing the teeth part, or whatever it is. But you cannot ask of them something until you've given as well, right? So remember, this is all in conjunction. And it sounds like it's going to be more effort. It might be for a few days, but mark my words, your life as parents will be a freaking dream compared to the other path, right? So we must make sure that they're allowed to have their big feelings around the boundaries that we hold at any point. But at the beginning, it's bigger because they don't trust you to hold it, probably, right? There's probably been many circumstances where you negotiate, oh, I'll give you the, oh, do this instead, like, oh, like, no, right? Or you let the boundary go because you can't be bothered, and you end up screaming, and they know if you're getting heightened, they'll just push a bit more, because you're about to snap, and just be like, but whatever, take it then, have it, can't be bothered, that sort of thing. And so it's really important to remember that when you're first asking for their trust, that you must remember that you probably haven't held it before, or maybe for a little while. Maybe you tried, like all the things, right? Maybe you do, and you're just here just to have a little chit chat. But basically, what we want to do is remember that this feels really big for them to let go of control, because what happens is when they can't trust their big people to hold the boundaries, they have to take control, right? Because somebody not leading this is not an option, right? So if you're not leading bedtime because you've given up on all the boundaries and all the things, and your word carries no weight, well, they'll lead bedtime. But the thing with us is that when we feel insecure, we want control more, right? When things feel too big for us, we want to control more, right? And so what happens is that our toddlers start to get more and more requests, right? Guys, please, like, if this is really talking to you at the moment, like, please put it in the Q&A. Like, please let me know if you're like, this is where we're sort of at. But basically, as soon as they start to get into this role of like, they're now leading that bedtime, they'll be like, no, in this bottle, no, I want that bottle, no, this color, no, that, like this, that, like all the way. And it just spirals even more. Now, that is because essentially they're now like insecure, a bit anxious, like, because they're now leading this big show, right? So they need to have more safety checks, that everything's like is as they're asking and it's all in line for them, to make them feel more secure, right? So when you say, you know what, babe, like, I've been to this webinar and now I'm going to get back this control, you're going to have the biggest tug of war, because it feels really freaking unsafe for them to let that control go again, right? Because they everything started to slide a little bit. So I want you guys to remember that the initial part will be a bit tougher, but here's the next thing. You don't get involved too much in the dialogue of back and forward, okay? The boundary doesn't need a lot of discussion or words around it. It is as it is. I've said no yogurt pouch tonight. I've said no more milk. There's no screen in the lead up to bedtime, right? That sort of thing. It's called Hold On to Your Kids is the book. I really want to check that. I'm going to do that while I'm talking. But basically what we want to make sure, I can't do two things at once, apparently. Give me one sec. Hold On to Your Kids. I can't stress it enough. It is the single most important children's book I've ever read in my life, by far. It's profound. Like, if you guys worry about your children in school, high school, drugs, going off the rails, like having a good relationship with them, like, this book is a must. I literally said to my husband straight away, like, you have to, like, it's so unbelievable. So yeah, so basically, you're going to get a bit more tug of war. You don't need to go and then negotiate around the actual boundary. The boundary is that it is. We're not having screen time. You've had some this afternoon. It's done, right? Move the iPads out of the way, get rid of them altogether until they have to have them in school one day. But whatever, move them out of the way, whatever it is that you need to do. It doesn't come out, right? Now they're going to have all their, don't keep being like, well, you iPad on this day and will iPad on, like, no, let it go. The boundary is that the iPad or the screen time is done, right? That's it. Now, your next goal is like, okay, well, do you want to come and do this? Or, you can keep having your big feelings, babe. Like, I'm here for you when once you're ready to have a cuddle, let's have a cuddle. Um, Now, really important for dads to make sure too, they're not like, what's wrong with him? Or like, mum, what's wrong with them? Like, whatever it is, right? But it's so important that you're not shaming or judging them. Really important, right? You're basically able to be like, and even if it's triggering you, move away for a second. I'd rather you walk away for a moment and just say, mum's busting for the toilet or whatever it is. I need to take a moment. Let them see you, like, just take a little bit of a moment, whatever they need to do, right? But you're going to teach them that their feelings are safe to feel. This is the whole issue with so much of like us and our parenting, like all the things, is that we're so afraid of feeling. We're so afraid to slow down in our lives because as soon as we slow down, we start thinking and our feelings feel too much, right? But actually, imagine being able to teach a child that all feelings are safe. Because the thing is, they're all going to be socially okay. Like, if you teach your child from young that a boy, for example, it's okay to cry, like, trust me, like social pressure will make sure that they're still reasonable. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't mean that then they're just going to be having meltdowns at 18 because you've said, if anything, they're going to be able to regulate their emotions instead of keeping them all in and then having to escape the feelings that they've held down, right? Because the body keeps a score. All that shit gets just compounded. And when they can't be in their bodies anymore because it feels too much, they've got too much anger, too much whatever, right? We don't have to worry about it coming out in nightclubs when they're drinking or feeling of, wanting to feel numb from their feelings or escape their feelings because they've learned how to feel it. They learn how to process it and they know it's going to pass and they're going to be okay. And as they start to get older, they'll become better with this conditioning, just as what you would if we practice this, right? The thing I used to get panic attacks, the thing that has, like, I'm not going to say 100%, but really significantly, like, well, I'm just saying that because I don't want to like jinx her future, but I don't even have to worry about it anymore, was the fact that I had felt like so scared of that feeling of the like like when I'd start to get that feeling, that rush, that adrenaline, that most horrific anxious feeling would come up. And the fear of feeling that was so bad that breath work actually made me feel it and made me realize it's just energy. Energy is essentially emotion. It is emotion, sorry, is energy in motion. The more that that emotion can come out instead of getting stuck inside of us, the better chance they've got of regulating, right? And when they can feel it and know that it's safe and it comes out and it goes, and then they're back to like this, like you can see it, how good they feel when they get it out. That's what you want. But while they're getting it out, you want them to learn ways. It might be that if they're really angry, instead of hitting you or hitting, you say, I will not let you hit me, but let's go into your room. Let's smash it out in the pillow. Let's, whatever it is, when you still feel so frustrated, like go get a ball, like let them have healthy ways of expressing this anger, right? It needs to come out. It is not that we are trying to make children not be these things. That is not successful parenting. When children are just like, ribbon on top, right? I want you guys to be more worried. Like my daughter, like I know she's like more like the perfect good girl. She does everything right at school. And sometimes she'll come home and she'll be like, I just feel so angry sometimes. And I'm like, oh, like get it out, like just get it out, right? And she's like, but I don't want to, like, am I still me? Because she just wants to be, and I just want her to be the opposite. I'm just like, get dirty, babe, like get it all out. So guys, like I know I spent a bit of time on this, but that is how you hold the boundary. You hold the boundary by the boundary is it as it is. Make it fair. Don't be douchebags and be like, you spilt the milk. That's it. You've lost your bloody baseball bat. Like, come on. We need to find the things that matter. Screen time, safety, sleep, food, like whatever it is that are really sort of values for you, like the way that we speak to our family and things like that, which is often modeling. So just keep an eye on how we're talking to each other, that sort of thing, right? But those really pivotal like boundaries that you sort of go, like, these things really matter for my children's outcome. Like, I'm okay to hold that. I'm okay to hold that. I'm okay that my 4-year-old doesn't need a dummy anymore. My 4-year-old doesn't need their bottle anymore. And they're going to have really big feelings over that. And I'm going to make sure we spend some days like really having some time together and feeling that connection, that their cup is full, because, I've taken something and it feels really big for them. That sort of thing matters. You can see how there's that relationship of, you can have your big feelings and I'm not going to shame you. I'm not going to look at you and be like, because I can tell you what, when your children are in their big feelings and they're feeling really angry and they're really ragey and they're just beside themselves, when your toddlers are, what I can tell you is that they're more scared in that moment than you are. They don't know how to handle that more than you don't know how to handle that. Right. And so when they're big, people are like, oh, babe, I know it feels like so much, but it's okay. Like, let it out. Like, be really angry. It's okay that you're angry. It feels so big, doesn't it? It feels so sad. I know you're so sad by that. Like, imagine if like we had that. Imagine if we gave that. Imagine if we gave that to our partners. That space to be like, yeah, that's really, really shitty. Like, how shitty is it in that moment? But I love you and I'm here for you. I won't let you hit me. I won't let you hit your sister. If you want to have big, like those big, you need to go to your room, like whatever it is, right? I will not allow specific certain things, right? And you can move them away. But then also, like, do they just need to be away from the whole family? Do they just need a bit of space with just you, right? You and me are going to go for a walk. You and me are going to have a little toddle to the end of the street with a 3-year-old. You and me are just going to go hang out in the other lounge room, blah, blah. Like, you've got big feelings, like not where everyone's watching them. And also just making them feel safe in that moment, that it's really safe to bring out all their big feelings, but also the boundary doesn't change. So that's the difference between passive, so gentle but passive parenting is when you're just trying to appease and don't want to make them cry. They might get cortisol raises. They're going to get cortisol anyway all day at points. But basically, the idea is that there's that kind but firm, right? So that firm boundary is not the negotiating. I don't want you then being like, if we drop don't get screen time, but I'll go get you an ice cream so they don't have their big feelings. It's not what we want. We want them to be able to get through that and understand that life is not all like you're going to have no's, and it's important that they can regulate through those, and also through our relationship. So that is really important when it comes to the lead up to bedtime, because you cannot address. Now, I know a lot of you guys will be here because you're like, I'm stuck sitting by the edge of the bed and this lady's still raving about behavior, but it's really important. So that is your lead up to bedtime. You can't just go into a bedtime routine, right? And say, well, I'm sick of sitting at the bedtime for essentially like 2 hours at night talking to my, waiting for my child to fall asleep, right? Tell me how to fix that one thing. Children are not one thing. They are holistic. They are every part of what I've just spoken about. You must give, there must be take, there must be relationship, the connection, the right awake time, the sleep pressure, the outdoor time. Sounds hard? It's not. It's just basic. We play outside, we have some connection time, that sort of thing, right? It is literally bringing it back to, like, imagine just a bit more old school parenting, or not even old school parenting, but old school living in a way. And then when we go into their room, now here's the thing: if you're stuck in the bed with them and you're stuck in there for hours, this is the next thing I want you to do. You can either bring a chair in, right? And there's a few ways that you can do this. And guys, honestly, in our toddler sleep program, I'm not selling it to you, I'm just saying, we talk you through step by step and we troubleshoot with you, right? So if you are really struggling with toddler bedtimes, firstly, I will send out even a discount if you do need it, right? I'll send that out. But irrespective to that, what I want you to note is that you're now there. If you have to be there for your little one to fall asleep, your toddler to fall asleep in their bed, you can't just from the outside of the room return them 50 times a night and not make eye contact. It won't work, right? We all know this. Everyone's probably tried it. And if you call Nagala, they'll say, put a mattress on the floor next to their bed. And you're like, yeah, that's cool. How long for? I've got to get somewhere sometime. And the thing is that when it comes to little ones' bedtimes, they can be a really bloody beautiful process. And I know that everyone here wants to finish their day on a good note and not on a shitty note when you go to bed feeling guilty because you've lost your shit again because you've been in there for 3 hours, which most people would. I would if I had to sit on the edge of the bed and watch a performance for 2 hours. Like, no thanks. So it's really important when it comes to this lead up to when it comes to that bedtime, that now you're in their room. I want books out of the bed because what happens is if you have to be there for your toddlers at the beginning of the night, whilst they're starting to start that sleep process, get drowsy, wound down, if you have to be there for that, you have to be there during the night, right? So if their sleep association is that you're reading books, like in the lead up to bedtime, they're having their milk, maybe they're falling asleep with milk, maybe you're sitting on the edge of the bed, maybe you're waiting at the door but returning a lot, that if you're getting frequent night waking, it's probably because you're playing a role, right? So rather than thinking about capping and squeezing and stretching these times, think about what does my little one associate with sleep? Like what's happening in the last 15 minutes before sleep? Is it me? Is it somewhere that I'm sort of doing? If you're just giving me a smooch in bed and leaving and not coming back 15 times, because sometimes people say like, no, I don't have to sit there. I just come back and check on them. But the child's like aware that you're like standing right outside the door or you're rotating around the door 15 times. So during the night, they want you to go back to that same space, right? It's like a baby. If they fall asleep with a dummy, they wake up, they're like, where is this? Where's it gone? Or a breast, for example. And so then from there, after you've done this stamp chart, you might bring a chair in. For example, a lot of people say, I've tried these things before. There's a few things around it, but you might sort of bring a chair in. But ultimately, what it is that you're saying to your little one, I'm happy to be here, but you need to lay quietly. And your boundary is, I will be here, but you need to lay quietly. And if they're not laying quietly after one warning, so sweetie, you need to be laying quietly, then I'm going to step back for a moment, right? I'm going to step out for a moment because my boundary is that I'm going to be there for you, but you need to lay quietly, right? So we need to then establish this idea that bedtime is for them laying quietly. We're not putting any pressure around the word sleep. Okay, take the word sleep just like eat. When it comes to, if you've got a fussy eater, take the word eat out of your mouth, take the word sleep out of your mouth, right? Because those things are what put a lot of pressure and attach a lot of emotion to the word, right? You need to sleep, get to sleep, lay down and sleep. Like, no, it is lay quietly, rest yourself, or whatever it is that feels comfortable for you guys. Just chill, baba, whatever it is, right? But I'm not here to be an audience to a performance. I'm not here for a 25-minute conversation. I'm not here for this and that. So I'm here just to be here for a while. And then you can start to do some weaning away, leaving, coming back, that sort of thing. If you are doing a leave and come back, you need to come back initially quite quickly, and then you need to space that over a period of time. But there usually has to be, like, if they're getting up in the nighttime, you need to move to the point. The nighttime waking won't stop until they get to a point where you say goodnight, they're in bed, and then you leave and don't have to come back. Or, that sort of idea. Because when that happens, they're more likely to fall asleep independently. When they wake up, nothing's changed. If they fall asleep with their door open a crack and the light on, which is very normal from 2 years and above, if they fall asleep with that, don't turn the lights off in the middle of, like, when you go to bed, and shut their door, because they wake up and it's all different. So make sure how they fall asleep is the same as when they awaken during the night. And then from there, make sure that you've got that boundary and that action. Now, if you feel like then you're getting that constant sort of, coming back and returning, that's when you need to have some sort of like consequence in place. So it might be that, for example, I'm stepping out of the room for a moment, or you guys, we have like a number of ways that you can go about this. I'm not even going to really get into that part too much because of the fact that it's so like, personal as to like, what that sort of looks like for you guys. But having that in place to show them, well, this really is that firm boundary. If you're doing 13 warnings, even two, to be honest, and not staying with them, then again, you're saying to them, I'm not holding my word. So you can try a bit more, and eventually I'll just, do X, Y, and Z, right? And one thing that I would say is that when you know exactly how to manage that bedtime period, now you know why they're waking. The goal is to be able to put them down and step right out. The next goal is to make sure that if you are there, it's with the boundary of it's laying quietly. And then you need to have a consequence or a boundary in place for if they keep getting up and or keep getting out of bed or whatever when they're pushing back. But it's really important that when you have a confident plan, your toddlers and your children will feel that straight off the bat. Like when you go in, and like so many families say this, they're like, Tara, I've done stuff before. I've done this program, this, but like when parents go in and I've had this chat with them, and obviously more like they're just like they just knew, like they were just like, oh, and they had their big feelings about it, but the parents weren't like panicked. Now, when your little toddlers, especially in the lead up to bedtime or around that bedtime change, have their big feelings about the fact that you're not sitting in their bed, you're sitting next to their bed and you're starting to move away or whatever it is, right? I want you guys to remember that I'm okay and they're okay. This is okay. They're in a loving home. Nothing's going to damage their attachment. Their attachment is built up by a million different things, and you're still there for them and all of that. But it's very okay for you to have a boundary around that bedtime period, right? But it's not that you want to be there as an audience to a performance. Like that's just gets really lengthy and it gets really frustrating. And it also leaves them too much leeway to be able to just try one more thing, do this, do that. Um, and that tends to just lead to a lot more like mayhem for them as well. So I always want you to take this phrase of I'm okay and they're okay. And my children are so capable and they're so okay that they can handle boundaries, they can handle big feelings, and they can handle the fact that they have to let that control come back to me, because I'll show them that I've got them in this space, right? And so that lead up to bedtime really, really matters. And having that action and the reaction in place, for when they're not doing that thing, be that you stepping out, whatever that might be, is really important. And then also, if you think, no, I just don't have enough of that confidence, or I just feel stuck here, that sort of thing, then that's what you might want to, that's when you might want to sort of check in with us. So, yeah, Neve has written, what if your little one cries to the point of not being able to breathe? So, if you've got a breath holder that like essentially passes out, because some children will do that, that's obviously a little bit different. But what for me, I think for me, the point would be is a lot of people have tried this, but they haven't done the whole lead up. They haven't done the stamp chart. They haven't done the other boundaries, the physical expenditure, the no screen time. And guys, I'm just going to touch on that in the lead up for the bedtime changes. Screens impact everything for our children, right? We now know, and I'm not going to say the percentage because I think it's very overwhelming, but the statistics are now clear that children who spend an hour, so an hour a day, 3 and under on their screens have a significant chance, and screens is all screens, and that it increases their chance of attention disorders, right? Because when it comes to screens, what happens is that on the screens, it's like flashing, changing, scene changes, angle changes, sound changes, next thing comes in, then the next thing comes in, because it's the actual changes in those things that keeps the brain looking. It keeps their attention. If it was just the same screen, well, we'd start looking over here. We're just looking at the same thing, right? But it's all the movement that keeps capturing that attention of our children. And so these people who create these shows now know that the more changes and flashes and action and things that we can get happening, in this on the screen at any point will now mean that we keep a child's attention longer, right? Which is their whole goal, right? Unfortunately, that means that when our child then tries to concentrate on doing a colouring in, or trying to write their name, or trying to read a book, or just sits down to simply be in nature, and there's not 57 screen and noise changes within that minute, it's very hard for the brain to slow down and concentrate. And it's looking for the next hit of dopamine, literal chemicals, right? And it's looking for that. And so this is why our children are struggling with also behavioral things, because when the screens go off, their brains have been like wired. They're wired internally. They haven't been expending physical energy. It's all pent up, right? Turn the screen off, brain's wired, body's full of energy, and they're just like reckless, right? Or big feelings, big emotions, big feelings, big upset, the increases in, all the things. So be that anxiety, depression, all of those things is so dramatically increased. And like, obviously then down the track, we've got all of our social media to deal with as well. People say to me like, oh, I see them like, oh, but they're 6 now, they're in school, they need to have Fortnite, they need to have all these addictive things, like all these screens, because that's how they fit in. Do they need to have drugs so they fit in when they're in year 10 too? Like, genuinely, is that what we do now as parents? We make our children fit in, or do we hold boundaries for the things that we know are better for them? Like, it's nonsensical to me. Firstly, secondly, my children don't have the rubbish and they fit in beautifully. Scarlett will next year like be the leader, like whatever, you know, like she wants to be the pillar leader for whatever. Like she's such a social girl. She's playing, you know, on the basketball court every day. Like, and as they're getting older, they're like, Mom, like this person at school has got like this. They are such a nightmare. Like the you know, so many issues in class because children are just, they cannot be said no to, like their parents can't hold their boundaries, and they're craving the constant hits, they're craving the screen time. They don't have, you know, instead of going home and having that connection with family to build the connect to direct, so that their parents still have influence and things like that. Like it honestly impacts everything. And then more than that, it's what they're missing out on: social skills, that interaction, that ability to be able to communicate well, like in terms of actually talking, critical thinking, problem solving, like all the things, the fine and gross motor skill, kicking, having wonder in nature. Being bored is so freaking important. Being slow, being still, being able to feel our emotions instead of just putting a screen in front of them so they don't feel their emotions, because guess what that's teaching them as they get older is escape, instead of feeling like all these things matter so freaking much to our little ones. And so when it comes to bedtimes, like that lead up, sorry, Neve, going back to that lead up and things like that, you don't need to like, so you need to keep that in mind. Then in terms of the like the breathing side of things, I think, to be honest, if it's really bad, like you're probably better off doing a one-on-one where we can then essentially start to you know, we can start to like really help you, support you while you hold the boundary. But also children, if you always, so for example, some kids will make themselves sick, and then they start doing it in shopping centers to get what they want as well, right? So we have to be mindful that we are also teaching in that way as well. What I would say is that there is ways to support them, especially if you're worried that their breath holding will mean that they will pass out. But often they will end up taking the breath. They're just really, really angry. And especially, to be honest, I always say the ones who are like so worked up, they're usually the ones that have, that need that real firm, really steady, really clear boundary the most. They really do. Like the ones that are at that next level, which to be honest is a lot that we work with. It's just because they're like, the parents are just like, they just get to this point and I just don't know, and they actually need it the most, you know. Um, yeah. So now the whole scared thing, it's a biggie, but here's the deal. We can't get through that fear without holding them through that fear, right? So we could easily just continue with the whole they're scared thing, but the only way he's going to learn that it is safe is by staying in his bed and by us holding the boundary, and staying pretty consistent. Because once he gets through a night and we say the next day, see, like nothing's happening, like everything's okay, they have to almost feel the fear and get through it anyway. There's one thing. So one thing is you show them through it by making them do it, basically. But in saying that, often it's not always the scared part anymore. It's the fact that they're worked up because they know that that will be what ends up getting them into your bed. And I know that I'm making them sound like they're very manipulative, but toddlers are meant to be. They're meant to do this. They're very clever. Um, and so in the end, what becomes one thing, and then they're like, I'm scared. And then they come in, and then the first night they may have actually been a bit scared, but after night, you know, 3 months, it very much becomes what they will say. And it doesn't mean they won't initially be worried to begin with, but it doesn't mean we can't push them through that and show them that they're okay, as well. Whereas if you keep allowing that, you're showing them, well, maybe it isn't okay, right? Because you're not making them do that, so to speak, and get through that. Yeah. Sarah, so I wouldn't say it's like a developmental thing. I think at any point for toddlers, and even young children, they'll go through patches where they'll be like, I want to come into your bed. It's up to each individual family to decide, like, okay, we'll let them for a little bit and see if they then go back into their own bed, after a while. But the only thing is that you have to decide, like, okay, how long for, and if we start letting them, are we prepared to do this? Because I would say if you're not, then you're better off holding the boundary first and foremost. But I wouldn't say it's like at that point necessarily a developmental thing, but I think yeah, they'll just go through moments. But I more be looking at too, like, are they just due for a bit more awake time? What's their sleep pressure like? What's their screens like? That sort of thing, you know? Yeah, so Ryan, great question. So when you're moving your little ones from a cot to a toddler bed, make sure their sleep is good before you move them if you can. Okay, it's quicker. It's just a quicker process in the cot. both very much just as possible, but just a bit of a quicker process. The next thing is make sure that you choose a night where they've built up that sleep pressure. All the other lead ups that I spoke about, get that stamp chart on board. Basically, so basically make sure that you get that stamp chart on board. You might have a lucky dip for a few days once they make that initial move, but not necessarily. And to be honest, just be really confident and be really just like Nana's time, sweetie. Once they go in, don't just linger for the sake of it. Treat them like they absolutely can do it. They've done it before. Just pretend Nana's time, babe. Then if they get out, the first night you might return them a few times, but after that, I'd start to be like, sweetie, if you get out of your bed, like, and then I'd start to hold that boundary. All right, I'm just going to get to a couple more questions and then we will wrap up. So, Stacey, great question. How do we know if big feelings are related to all the things that I'm talking about, or just new siblings or something else? Here's the thing, we might not always realize with our toddlers what big feelings are related to, but I know what we can do to help them during that. So, when it's a new sibling, right, let's just say if we think it's from that, what would be important would be not increasing screen time too much because we're going to get the behaviors more so and they're going to have a harder time emotionally. Not increase, which is what I spoke about as in one of the points. In connection where possible, another point from before that still matters in this case. So finding just moments of saturation, even if it's 5 minutes here and there, right? The connection time, holding bedtime to a good time so that they're not getting way overtired or things like that, right? Essentially making sure that we're loving and kind, that our boundaries still there. Now, when a new toddler, if it's a new toddler, you might give a little bit more room, right? But not too much. What I tend to see with when there's new siblings, things derail typically because suddenly those big feelings, or not even the big feelings, sorry, but the boundaries become really relaxed because we feel guilty, right? We feel like, oh, I feel so bad that this other little one has now taken over so much time and things. And so it's really important to make sure that we pay attention first to like, have we just totally let boundaries lax? And that's why we're getting even more big feelings. And also just time to let them feel those feelings. So it would be the same thing, letting them have those feelings, having a lot of compassion in those moments for those feelings, offering a lot of physical like comfort where you can, but letting them get it all out. So either which way, it would be the same or similar management, the same idea as to how we, carry through things through. No, Ellie, it's not lack of connection at all. So there's a couple of questions here for under 2-year-olds. And listen, in terms of that, so basically under two, so around that 21-month mark, and upwards, you hit this really tricky period. More so, I would be looking at the awake times before bed. Are they right? Is the sleep pressure built up enough? Um, and what are the boundaries and how am I managing the settles? So Anonymous, who's written about a nearly 2-year-old falling asleep and not falling asleep for day naps, and Ellie, yours would more be those things, trialing different awake times, the sleep pressure, but then how you manage the settle, how you manage that clot transfer, um, and then how you manage them going into the cot, and then how you manage that night waking is going to be how like that, seeing that change. I would suggest for both of you guys maybe to jump, if it continues, if you need more support, to go into the baby sleep program, or to work one-on-one with us, um, especially for your Anonymous whose little one has been falling asleep on the couch. To get your babe now at 2, depends how long you've been doing it for. It might be quite tricky. So I'd be definitely something that I'd be, considering looking, at, whether or not you do that. Um, Megan, can you just reach out to me? Can you just send me an email, hun? So that I just need to be over a little bit more. That would be amazing. Sarah, as close to 3 and over as possible. Kirsten, if you're having trouble with them falling out of bed, they usually learn it pretty quickly. But if you're having trouble with that, maybe you can put one of the bedside rails up. I don't know if anyone's like saying they're not safe now or anything. Like I'm sure that they are. But I just maybe put a bedside rail up, or you can get bed socks, which are like sheets where they keep you more like in tucked in. So Megan, please send me an email. Guys, I will send you this. I would love your feedback. Like honestly, if you can jump into my Insta, yeah, or if you loved it, please feel free to pop a review up. But please give me your feedback on tonight. I hope you've gained a lot from it. Yeah, and I'll send you all an email with the replay. So big love all. See you soon.